Welcome to episode 3 of Your Better Health with Dr. Girraj Bansal, a scientist, engineer, and medical doctor from Columbus, Ohio. Dr. Bansal is a board-certified diagnostic and internal medicine specialist. He's a graduate of the Ohio State University Medical School, where he got his MD, and Case Western Reserve University, where he got his PhD. Dr. Bansal has served the Central Ohio community as a health and wellness expert for over 40 years. He has been the medical director of 3 addiction clinics and is currently the medical director of 3 urgent care facilities in Central Ohio. Dr. Bansal believes in an analytical, scientific, and holistic approach to individualized health. This incorporates both physical and mental health while keeping the needs of the soul and spirit in mind. In the last 2 podcasts, we discussed the mental health pandemic and some of the basic causes of unhappiness. Today, we are going to take a deep dive into understanding the mind, body, spirit, and soul, and how they interrelate. Dr. Bansal, welcome.
Thank you.
What is the relationship of the brain with the mind and mindfulness?
Okay, so, every family actually practices this every day. When the mother hugs her child, when he's going to school and when he comes back, hugs, it secretes oxytocin. That's the hormone which bonds together. So the brain to me, is an anatomical structure, just like any other organs in the body. The way I look at mind, brain is not same as mind and mind is not brain. To me, mind is an offspring of brain, who gets its nourishment through the transmitters and hormones secreted by the brain. The mother brain also provides him or her with a playground with a lot of toys in it. For example, the hypothalamus, different cortexes, and then cerebellum, pituitary gland, hypothalamus. And when the mind presses one button or the other to play with those toys, they secrete different kinds of hormones or transmitters. And sometimes the mind gets rewarded, sometimes gets punished. Yeah, so that is the relationship of the mind with the brain. The mindfulness, as I said in my first or second podcast, that mindfulness is a process, is an action, which is very similar to the contraction of the heart, contraction of the bladder, respirations of the lungs. So it is no different than any other actions in the body.
Why the other organs in the body, like the heart, bladder, or liver, do not have a child similar to the one that the brain does?
Okay, so first of all, the scientists who deal with the anatomy, they have not provided me any clue that there is anything inside the heart other than the 4 chambers. But there are some mystical answers or spiritual answers which say that, for example, if we take the example of the heart, if you put a baby inside the heart chamber, the heart, when it contracts in systole, means when it throws the blood out, the speed of the blood is between 7 and 10 miles an hour. And when it relaxes and gets the blood from other sources, the velocity is about maybe 1 miles an hour. So can you imagine this baby bouncing back and forth between 11 miles and 10 miles an hour to 1 mile an hour with a heart rate of 60 beats a minute? So this is one of the the spiritual explanation. And the same thing they talk about bladder and guts. And then, for example, in the liver does receive glucose and iron and copper as a storage. So if you put a baby in, he or she will be waiting for these molecules to come and capture them. So I don't know what kind of life it is. And then he had no playground. So that is one of the reasons I can think of.
You think about body parts and organs and their function and their connection to the brain and the mind. How does that tie into some of the things that we've talked about in the first two podcasts? What is the relationship?
Well, the way I look at it, that mind is the one, when he or she gets tired playing into their small skull cavity, throws its arms and legs to these body organs by neural pathways. And then there are two kinds of pathways. One is sympathetic and one is parasympathetic. Now, to look at those, sympathetic is the one which increases your heart rate and also increases your blood pressure in a situation where you are in fight or flight response. The parasympathetic does just the opposite. It slows the heart rate. So what I'm saying is these are the connection of the mind with different organs. The bladder has the same thing, and the gut has the same thing. And so these are the neural pathways with which the mind communicates.
So when we think about attractions, or when we think about something that has happened that is good or bad in our lives, why does it come back to the heart and not to the mind or some other place?
Yeah, so I think mind and heart are involved, but not the other organs. So I don't know why mind favors the heart, but I'll come back later when they talk about the soul, which is related to the mind, does not reside all the time in the brain, in the pineal gland, but it has a cushion, or it has a sofa or a seat which extends from the brain to the heart. So when your heart is disheartened or is broken, the soul can go and console that heart. I don't know why it happens, but when you see the things like they talk about heart and soul, which means that I'm full of energy. So here the heart and mind are connected. Then they say learning by heart, but you don't learn by heart, but somehow it is committed to the memory in the brain. So people don't talk about liver and soul or bladder and soul, but I don't know the answer, but that's one of the answers. So what happens is that if something happens good, the heart is blessed. Okay, if something happens bad, then the heart is cursed. So for example, if you are under stress, you have a heart attack, but you don't have a pulmonary embolism or a deep vein thrombosis, which is causing you to die. But so you have a cortisol, you get platelet inflammation, and you have platelet aggregation, and then the thrombus means clot builds up in the heart. So these are the observations, but I cannot give you the answer why. Why heart, why brain or mind favors the heart.
I have always thought that as a body, we had five senses: our sight, our ability to hear, our ability to smell, our ability to taste, and our ability to touch. But there are three new senses which connect the body with the mind. And I'd like to have you tell us what those three senses are, and of the three, what is the most important and how that works.
Okay, so I think I have talked about these senses in my first podcast, and I brought up that there is a proprioception, and then there is a vestibular system, and then the interoception. But now with new research, the neuroscientists call interoception as the sense sixth. What it says is that it's a bidirectional communication between between the bodily sensations and the mind and the different parts of the mind. And what it tells us that the bodily sensations are not visible, but somehow they get connected to the brain before the sensation comes or damage the system. So that's what.
What I hear you saying is that interoception is a lesser known sense, a sixth sense, if you will, that helps the individual understand and feel what's going on inside their body. Is that correct?
Inside their body, yes, that's right. So for example, a child, if he does not have the interoception, then he may feel hungry, but he would not know until that message is transferred to the brain.
And that's a neurotransmitter issue, correct?
I think so, but again, I'm not sure that because the gut does not make or the body doesn't make the neurotransmitters. So I don't know how those signals are sent to the brain. I cannot answer that. I think we have to go to the neuroscientist to answer those questions for us.
But at the very least, we can agree that if you have trouble with interoception as a sense, it could make self-regulation challenging.
Exactly. The harmony between the mind and body will be disturbed. Yes.
So moving on to another subject matter, years and years ago, I first heard the term psychosomatic disorder, psychosomatic illness. What is a psychosomatic disorder or illness, and what role does that play in mental health?
Okay, so mental health and the body health primarily. How the emotions control the body. So this is the word which is coined for psychosomatic is a mind body. This is one word, and it says how the mind affects the body. Now, these disorders are primarily connected to our unconscious state of mind. So just to make it clear, there are three types of consciousness. One is actual consciousness, means awareness of self and the environment. And then you have memories and your feelings all stacked up somewhere, which can be retrieved and verbalized. That's the consciousness. Then these are unconsciousness, which is those memories cannot be retrieved from the awareness. And then there is a subconscious that's between the two. So psychosomatic disorders are really the product of the unconscious mind. So we are talking about, for example, if you have a stress, you can have they call it a GI problems like gastroesophageal reflux disease. You can have autoimmune disease. You can have early rheumatoid arthritis. You can have neurodermatitis. So these diseases may not have any biological evidence in the beginning, but it's caused by the stress, which is linked to these problems.
When somebody has a problem, but it's not necessarily a diagnosed problem, does that qualify as psychosomatic? Are they making up their own problems?
Yeah, usually if you cannot find something, then it may be in your head. There are other diseases like fibromyalgia, the chronic fatigue syndrome, and then irritable bowel syndromes. We cannot find any etiology of these diseases. So I've noticed that the patients who are under stress or anxiety, these irritable women, just like mind gets irritated, the bowel gets irritated, and then you can have fibromyalgia where the muscles gets irritated. So I think there is a lot of component of the stress in the mind in psychosomatic diseases.
Now, we've talked about the obvious connection between the mind and the body. In the 40 years that you've been practicing medicine, you have numerous case studies that bring the mind and body connection into obvious view. Can you share a couple of those with us?
Well, I'll share 4 of those, and they will be real fast. When I started my practice in 1987, I saw 2 cases where one patient was 27-year-old and one was 37-year-old. One has a severe Legionella disease, pneumonia, and the other one has a severe coronary artery disease. And other specialists who were on the case, they actually completely written off on both of them. And they said there is no hope, and this is how it is. But when I talked to both of them, one was 27-year-old and one was 37-year-old, they had a desire to live. And again says, Dr. Bansal, do something. And as I said, that I just kept on going. And then finally, both of them walked out of the hospital. And one is still my patient. He had pneumonia, and he's coming to me for like 35 years. And then lately he said, Doc, I'm on the oxygen. Can you help me in getting rid of the oxygen? But he said, I want to live. So we arranged a consultation with Cleveland Clinic for lung transplant. The other lady lived another 33 years, and then she died of kidney disease. So here I'm talking about the mind and body connection in the same human being. Give you an example of another one that when I was working in the emergency room about maybe 35 years ago, the grandfather came in with his grandson, who was, I think, less than 2 years old. He was totally blue, he had no pulse, and he had no respirations. So, and the grandfather continued to tell me, and he was crying. He said, Doc, my boy cannot die. So here we are talking about a connection of the grandfather's mind seeing the dead body of his grandson that don't go away. And within about, I would say, 5 minutes of resuscitation efforts, the boy came to life. So these are my 3, but I give you one more example. That was a gentleman, 58-year-old, came from a suburb emergency room after he fell on the golf course and broke his hip. So all they did there, that was Friday afternoon, all they did there was the x-rays of the hip, and he wanted to come to our hospital, which is about 40 miles away from there, to have the surgery done by the best orthopedic surgeon. So this gentleman is lying there in my hospital since Friday afternoon till Sunday, 6 o'clock evening. So the nurse calls me up that this patient needs a preoperative evaluation, which means, Dr. Bansal, you have to make sure his heart and lungs and other organs can take the surgery. So when I went to the patient's room around 6:15, he was laughing. He says he's looking for the surgery. So I just asked him one question. I said, sir, did you trip over something on the golf course, or did you feel lightheaded or dizziness? And he said, Doc, I was really dizzy. So immediately I ordered the EKG, and the EKG showed massive heart attack. If you're familiar with the anterior wall heart attack, and that's what it showed. And I was reluctant to tell the patient, knowing the mind and body connection, but when I told him that I'm going to transfer him to the unit or the intensive care, he said, why? Then I had to tell him that because you had a heart attack. And then as soon as I said, within 5 minutes, his blood pressure and the heart rate went below 40. and then he became comatose. So I transferred him to the unit, and 2 hours later, he died. So here is a connection with the mind and the body. And when I told his wife, and I said, I'm sorry I broke that news, and he died. And she hugged me, and then we got, separate ways. So this is one example. I can give you several examples from neuroscience where, like her name is Tara Swart, and I've heard several podcasts, and she was saying that when the king goes to the war and they have 5 wives, they want to impregnate all 5 wives at the same time, hoping that at least one child will survive. So these women, somehow they synchronize their menstrual period by their mind to that to happen. So, and then she gave another example that when the 2008, and then again in the COVID, when the stock market crashed, the young traders with no heart disease just dropping dead on the stock market exchange. So this is all mind and body relations.
Now, we've talked about mind and body so far, but what about the soul and the spirit? What is the origin of the soul and the spirit? Where do they reside? How do they interact with the mind and body?
I'm not a spiritual leader, but because you're asking the question, I will answer to my best of my ability, okay? Now, if you look at the soul means self, and in Hinduism that is called Atman, Atma or Atman. And the spirit is actually another divine entity, which means breath. So what I was going to tell, this is my belief, and I think the soul resides in the brain, and some of the scientists say that it resides in the pineal gland, which, in addition to giving the residence to the soul, it also makes melatonin for sleep and wake cycles. But some people, as I said before, that the soul has the seat which extends from the pineal gland to the heart. So the soul goes back and forth. Now, soul is actually your emotions of happiness and love and everything. And somehow the soul controls the mind, and soul resides in the body. The reason I'm saying is the researchers have done studies where they put patients who are going to die within a couple of hours. They put those patients, of course, separately in rooms which are totally soundproof, airproof, and nothing can come in and out. And then they have a phonograph recorder next to the patient. And what they found is that as soon as the patient takes the last breath, there is a recording on the phonograph, and then there is a crack in one of the glasses in the window. So what is telling me and telling them that the soul resides into the brain, but as soon as the last breath, the patient takes the last breath, soul just departs from the body. Now, what I'm trying to say, I just read maybe a few days ago, that here we are talking only about respirations. Patient may have heart rate because respirations is controlled by the brain. And when the brain doesn't get oxygen for 4 to 5 days, it's dead. So the brain stem, which causes the respiration, is also dead. But the heart's signal does not come directly from the heart, but from, they call it an SA node, which is a sinus atrial node, and that is still working. So some people in the hospital, when the heart is running, they said, oh, he's alive. But actually, after the respirations are gone, the patient is dead. So, and then the important thing is the spirit to me is outside the brain. Okay, so spirit is actually a connection between the soul and the divine. Okay, so now the question is, when the soul departs after the patient dies, do they, soul and spirit unite? Where do they reside? I don't have an answer for that. And I think for that, I would like to have answers from spiritual leaders and also from, the physicists and neuroscientists. So this is all I can tell you right now.